The Eastern Front, 1942. For the German soldier, the nights were a special kind of torment. Not the fighting, the waiting, the silence. After the brutal daylight battles, night was supposed to mean rest, safety. But here, in the darkness, a new fear was taking root. First you heard it. A tiny, sputtering engine. A sound that belonged on a peasant's farm, not a battlefield. Then, it stopped. And in that silence, you heard something worse. A soft, whispering rush of air. Something gliding, invisible, directly overhead. By the time the bombs hit, it was too late. 30 seconds of chaos. And then, gone. These attacks came night after night. The Germans, robbed of sleep and sanity, gave their tormentors a name: Nachthexen. The Night Witches.
They believed we were ghosts or sorceresses. We were neither. We were young women. And our weapon was a biplane most armies would have thrown away as junk. We were pilots, navigators, and mechanics. We wrote letters that said one thing: let us fight. They told us to stay home. We told them we were already trained.
To understand why they were there, you must understand the catastrophe of 1941. Operation Barbarossa. The Soviet Union was reeling. Millions were dead. The nation was bleeding to death. In this desperation, the call went out. It was answered by Marina Raskova, a national hero. On October 8, 1941, Joseph Stalin signed Order number WWII. Raskova was authorized to form 3 all-female aviation regiments. This was not propaganda. It was a desperate gamble for survival. Hundreds answered the call, converging on the Engels Military Aviation School.
We came from universities and factories. We dreamed of becoming fighter aces. The reality was harsher than the Russian winter. The military had no gear for us. We were given men's coats that hung to our knees, and boots we had to stuff with newspaper just to walk.
Their aircraft was the Polikarpov Po-2, a biplane from 1928, made of wood and canvas. Its top speed was slower than a German fighter's stall speed. It had no radio, no armor, and an open cockpit.
We called our plane, with grim humor, the Flying Coffin. The instructors said it wasn't a warplane. They were right. It was a tractor with wings, but it was ours.
Navigation was by map, compass, and stopwatch. Defense was darkness and silence. So this was the equation. Hundreds of young women, a plane made of plywood, and hope. A nightly mission against the most powerful army in the world.
They gave us the worst plane in the Air Force, but that was our advantage. To hunt a ghost, you first have to see it.
This was their weapon, against the entire Luftwaffe. What happened next would become one of the most remarkable stories of the Second World War. Spring 1942. The volunteers had endured the brutal winter at Engels. Their training, a 2-year course compressed into just months, was over. Now they were being sent to the Southern Front. The classroom was closed. The examination was about to begin. They had not just learned to fly. They had been forged into a complete, self-sufficient weapon. Every pilot, navigator, mechanic, and armorer was a woman. Their academy was the frozen airfield. Their textbook, the primitive machine they would have to master. Their most vital skill was night navigation. Without radios or instruments, their world was a map, a compass, a stopwatch, and a flashlight. An error of a few degrees in the pitch black meant missing the target, or delivering yourself to the enemy. The navigator in the rear seat was also the bombardier. Her task, to calculate the drop in a freezing, vibrating cockpit, aiming at shadows in the dark, and they learned the relentless, unglamorous craft of keeping these machines alive. Their de-icing tool wasn't a high-tech switch. It was a rag and a bucket of hot water. This was aviation, reduced to its most basic, brutal essence: hard labor. In late May 1942, the 588th Night Bomber Aviation Regiment reached the front. Their first combat mission was flown on the night of June 12th. Their commander was Yevdokia Bershanskaya, steady, respected. Her task, to prove this experiment would work. The weapon was the Po-2. The tactic was the swarm. The doctrine called it night harassment bombing. The reality was a psychological siege. A single crew might fly 8, 10, even 18 sorties between dusk and dawn. Drop 2 bombs, return, rearm, repeat. For the German soldier below, the war now had no pause, no rest, no night. They attacked in cells of 3. Nearing a target, the first plane would dive, a sacrifice to draw the searchlights and flak. While the Germans chased that ghost, the second and third would slip through the darkness. This was their signature, the silent attack. To vanish, the pilot would kill the engine and glide the final approach. The only sound was the wind in the wires, the ghostly whoosh that fueled the German myth of the broomstick.
A tap on the shoulder, a count in your head. You don't hear the explosion. You feel it through the airframe. Then you pray the engine starts again.
And then, the desperate gamble. Restarting the engine before the searchlights found you in the silence. The cold was a constant enemy. Open cockpits. Temperatures plunging to 40-degree sparks. Frostbite was a given. The planes, plywood and canvas, were tinderboxes. A single tracer could turn them into a falling sun.
You landed not when the mission was done, but when the fuel was gone, or the plane could not fly another mile. Once, I brought mine home with 42 holes in the wings, the map, and my helmet.
Survival meant flying lower than thought possible. They skimmed treetops, invisible to radar, and a nightmare for fighters. A Messerschmitt pilot faced a deadly puzzle. To shoot the Po-2 down, he first had to avoid stalling his own plane. The cost was written in the sky. The regiment would lose 32 of their sisters. Among the first was Yevdokia Nosal, a pilot who had joined after her newborn son was killed in a raid. On a mission near Novorossiysk in April 1943, she was killed instantly. Her navigator, Glafira Kashirina, was alone with her body and a plane falling from the night.
Held her by the collar with one hand and flew the plane with the other. The wind tried to take us. The hills tried to take us. But I would not let her plane be lost.
Kashirina wrestled the aircraft to the ground, saving herself and bringing her commander home. She received the Order of the Red Banner. Nosal was posthumously named a hero of the Soviet Union. Against the darkness, they forged light. They sang. They painted flowers on their planes. They used navigation pencils as lipstick. This sisterhood, forged in fire and ice, was their armor against the unrelenting terror.
We were all there. The mechanic who fixed the holes, the armorer who loaded the bombs. We turned the planes around in minutes. We flew, we fell, and we flew again, for each other.
The enemy's fear was their measure. German diaries confessed to chronic sleep deprivation and superstitious dread. They called the planes sewing machines. A lasting rumor claimed the Luftwaffe promised an Iron Cross for downing one Po-2, a myth that speaks volumes of the desperation they caused. Their impact was concrete. By war's end, honored as the 46th Taman Guards, they had flown over 23,000 missions, dropping 3,000 tons of bombs. They shattered depots, bridges, artillery. Their legacy was measured in these numbers and in the endless, sleepless nights of a terrified army. In Poland, 1944, Nadezhda Popova flew 18 missions in a single night, taking off, bombing, returning, a relentless, mechanical rhythm against the darkness until dawn.
They asked us how we measured success, not by the size of the bomb, but by the silence it broke, not by the plane we flew, but by the fear we sowed in those who heard it coming.
So, how do you measure the impact of a mosquito? By the sleepless nights of a giant. The giant was stirring, And the Night Witches were not done. By the spring of 1945, the Night Witches were a relentless instrument of war. Their final front was the road to Berlin itself. The numbers tell the story of their endurance. 23,672 combat sorties, over 3,000 tons of bombs, and 26,000 incendiary shells delivered by hand. 28,176 flight hours, the equivalent of flying for over 3 years without rest. They destroyed or damaged 17 river crossings, 9 railways, 2 railway stations, 26 warehouses, 12 fuel depots, 176 armored vehicles, 86 firing positions, and 11 searchlights. They also made 155 supply drops to Soviet ground forces. This was not symbolic. This was precise, grinding war. On May 4th, 1945, they flew their final mission, just 60 kilometers from Berlin. 3 days later, Germany surrendered. Their war was over. Victory Day, 1945. The Soviet Union erupted. But for the women of the 46th Guards, the moment was complex. They had won their war. Now they faced a quieter battle, the battle to go home. On October 15, 1945, the regiment was disbanded. The women were demobilized. The Sisters in the Sky were sent back to Earth. Despite being the most highly decorated female unit in the Soviet Air Force, they were not in the Victory Day parade. The official reason? Their planes were too slow. The state promoted a return to traditional roles. Female veterans found their stories minimized, their skills overlooked. Many faced difficulty finding work or being recognized as legitimate soldiers.
We had navigated blizzards and outflown searchlights. Now we were expected to be secretaries, teachers, and never mention how we'd once calculated bomb trajectories in the pitch dark.
Many did not speak of their service for decades, not even to their families. The silence was personal trauma and societal pressure. The war they fought was real, but its memory became a private burden. But history has a way of refusing to stay buried. In the West, historians began to unearth their story. Later, Russia itself rediscovered them. The survivors lived to see themselves celebrated. Finally, as pioneers. 23 of them had been named heroes of the Soviet Union. Irina Rakobolskaya, the regiment's chief of staff, lived until 2016. She became a physicist and a keeper of their story. Their legacy is not just in bombs dropped. It is in the absolute limit they redefined. They proved that will and ingenuity could make the obsolete devastating and the impossible routine. The Night Witches were never supernatural. They were something more powerful. They were real. With canvas wings and a courage that refused to stall, they flew into the dark heart of the war and rewrote the rules. Long after their last engine fell silent, the echo of their defiance still flies.